Morning, everyone. Thank you for logging in today. My name is Kylie. I'm a librarian with the Hawaii State Public Library System. It is my pleasure today to be moderating and hosting this virtual library program in honor of our summer reading challenge. For those of you that don't know, the library system has an annual summer reading challenge that anyone of any age can participate. You receive prizes for reading during the summer. Our website for our summer reading is librarieshawaii.org/summer reading. And with these reading challenges, we have a lot of activities, including our virtual program today. For those of you who are interested, the website has downloadable activity packets, and the grand prize is 4 tickets anywhere that Alaska Airlines flies. Now, thank you for allowing me my 2 minutes of library promotion. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Scott Crawford. He is the executive director for the Kīpahulu ʻOhana located on Maui. And today he's going to talk about their Opihi Rest Area program, making Opihi Momona Again. I am not going to take up a lot of introduction time because I'm sure Scott is going to talk about his organization and about his program. For everyone today, live transcripts are available. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you just have comments, like you'd like to say something's wonderful, please use the chat and I will be monitoring those things. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Kylie. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this program. And I'm going to, I gotta share my presentation here. As Kylie said, my name is Scott Crawford and I'm the executive director for Kīpahulu ʻOhana. And I'm happy to share about our Opihi program that we've been doing for the last decade or so, working to protect these precious creatures along the shoreline. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the life history and biology and ecology of Opihi. Talk about the programs, the efforts we've been doing for working with scientists for biological monitoring and research, and then our Opihi Rest Area initiative, and then a little bit about where we are now with our program and the community-based subsistence fishing area proposal that we're seeking to have designated for Kīpahulu moku. Just for those who don't know, the location of Kīpahulu is basically the very remote area on the southeast coast of Maui, south of Hana. Kīpahulu is a very rural area with like no county water or power. Everything is off the grid, and a very sort of small traditional community with some families who have maintained, traditional fishing practices there for many generations. And so our efforts are to be able to keep those subsistence lifestyles active and protect the resources that they depend on. Real quick, a little bit about the background about our organization. The organization was founded in 1995 at this project called Kīpahu Living Farm, which is a traditional wetland taro farm located near Ohio Stream, which we actually manage through a cooperative agreement with Haleakalā National Park. And pictured here is Uncle John Lynn, who is one of the founders of the organization. And sadly, he just passed away a little over a week ago. And so it's been a great loss to our community. But we also know that the best way to honor him and his memory and his legacy is to keep carrying forward the vision and the projects, the many people who he touched, and the many initiatives that he helped to start that are all part of what we're doing today with all these programs. So mahalo to to Uncle John. And then about around 2010, our focus had mainly been in the Kīpahulu Living Farm area, and then Uncle John talked about, you know, the Ahupua'a approach to land management is the connection between the Mālama I and the water flow and the stream life and everything. And so he encouraged us to look Makai and think about developing some programs for shoreline management and making that Mālama I connection. So around 2010 was when we started developing our Mālama I community action plan with input from fishermen and resource users and teachers and scientists. And out of that effort grew our Opihi, our Opihi program, as we identified Opihi as one of the more, one of the valued resources and also resources that could be at risk from over harvesting and that we wanted to be able to protect for the future. So we kind of came up with this, have developed over time this whole Opihi program. We have this saying, more Opihi make more Opihi, which is the idea that just, you know, you need, we'll get into the life cycle a little bit, but you need a certain like abundance of Opihi to be able to create more Opihi and successfully sustain a population. So there's 3 species of Opihi that are in the main Hawaiian Islands. Generally the Opihi Makaiauli, or the Blackfoot Opihi, which are the ones that grow up in the higher sort of splash zone of the shoreline along the intertidal area. The Opihi Alina, or the Yellowfoot, are the ones that grow in the sort of intermediate zone in that pink crustose coralline algae area and sort of where the limu grows. These are the ones that are especially desirable for eating, the best flavor that grow in amongst the limu. And then the Opihi ko'ele are the ones that grow underneath the waterline in the deeper level and are down below the water. They tend to grow larger than the other 2 species, but they're not harvested as much for eating. So those are your 3 Opihi species. And of course, the reason why we care about Opihi so much is because they're ono and people love to eat them. And they're an important nutritional source for, you know, for a diet off the land and the ocean. And Hawaiian families really love to have Opihi as part of ceremonies, especially, you know, or community events, special events like graduations and baby luau's and funerals. So the Opihi are really valued. They're delicious, they're nutritious, they're culturally important. But because of that, they sometimes can also get over harvested and end up being depleted. And there's 3 main habitat where the Opihi grow: the papa, or the bench area, the pohaku or boulder habitat, and then the pali or cliff habitat. A little bit, few interesting details about the Opihi. They have this kind of like a tongue called a radula, which is a very sharp, has like hooks on it that they use to sort of scrape the microscopic limu or algae off of the rocks. And they're kind of like a cleaner. They help clean the area where they live and keep it from getting completely overgrown by algae, and actually make room for other marine life that they share the habitat with. They have this this thing called a home scar, which you can see. And they don't travel too far. Once they've sort of landed on a rock and made their home and start to grow, they'll have that home scar that they come back to. That's like their spot. And then from there, they'll travel, you know, a few feet, crawl around that rock that they're on, but they don't go too much further than that. And then they're also, this is very interesting. A lot of people don't know that they are the prey for the predator snails, the small poo-poo that grow along the shoreline in their habitat. And this picture on the right, it shows a snail on top of an ʻOpihi, and this is the ʻOpihi's reaction to that. They send up their mantle and almost completely cover themselves and try to knock the snail off. And you see the ʻOpihi, you think ʻOpihi are slow, but when they smell one of these snails nearby, they'll like actually get up and like run. It's pretty funny to see. And the snails, if they can get on top of an ʻOpihi like this, they will drill through the shell of the ʻOpihi and then basically suck the ʻOpihi out from the inside. So that's all just part of the biology and the ecosystem that's happening there in the intertidal zone. There's a little bit about the life history and life cycle of ʻOpihi. Starting from the lower left, you have the adult ʻOpihis and you have male and female ʻOpihis. So they usually spawn around the new moon, and they're major, it seems like their major spawning time is especially around the solstices. So just a couple of weeks ago, the most recent new moon would have been one of their biggest spawning events. And the males and females release their sperm and eggs into the water. And from there, they float out, and the eggs are fertilized in the ocean. And they float around for, you know, a few hours and start growing once they're fertilized into these different stages across the top. And then by about 4 days, they reach this settler stage where, if they're lucky, they'll end up getting washed back onto the shoreline on a rock where they can land and take hold. By about 8 days, they become a recruit, and then in about 2 months, they're up to juvenile size, and in 6 to 8 months, they're back up to adult size and able to reproduce again. So that's the basic life cycle of the ʻOpihi. And part of the reason why we've been concerned about, you know, protecting the ʻOpihi and establishing these programs is because of decline. If you look at the upper left chart, you see this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but if you can, these little dots over here on the left are all the way from surveys that were done back in 1900 and early 1900s, showing these pounds of harvested ʻOpihi, and just indicate this like massive amount of ʻOpihi that were harvested back then, and how significant that was as part of the diet of the Hawaiian community at that time. And then moving forward, you see the you know, starting the surveys they did in 1940, 50 and on through into the 2000s, that those numbers are much lower. And then if you look on the bottom right, or the two areas on the right, you'll see that Oahu is very high impact and very few ʻOpihi left on Oahu because they've been so harvested. And Big Island and the Molokai and Lanai are not as impacted as much. Big Island partly because it's just a much higher coastline per population, so there's just a lot more area for them. Maui and Kauai are sort of in the middle, but Maui is definitely at risk. So we felt like it was important for us to take some effort to help to protect the Opihi before Maui, you know, became like Oahu. And one thing that's interesting too is that it doesn't seem like they really the larva can travel around the island, and in fact South Maui and East Maui seems to be important for seeding the areas on north and west shores of Maui. But they don't seem to travel between islands very much. They'll travel within Maui Nui, but they probably like aren't going from Maui to Oahu or Maui, you know, to the Hawaii island. And of course, I don't have a slide for this, but a little interesting thing is that the Opihi originally came from island in the ancestors of the Opihi originally came from an island in Japan. Now I forget the name of it, shoot, but it's near like Okinawa, around that area. And they would have traveled, you know, through across the Pacific as you know, over millions of years as the hot spot, basically, as the island chain, the archipelago Kaipaina formed and then disappeared. The Opihi moved down through the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, Papahanaumokuakea. And there's still some very, we've done some trips up to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands to study the Opihi up there as well. But then they worked their way down to the main Hawaiian Islands and developed into these three distinct populations or species that we have here. Actually, sorry, let's go back real quick. Just talk a little bit about the Opihi Partnership. This is something where we started working around 2008 with Dr. Chris Bird, who was at that time at University of Hawaii. He's now at the Texas A&M Corpus Christi, where in the biology department, where he has a lab there that he works with us on sort of crunching our data, and has Opihi graduate students that that help to do Opihi research. So, but this Opihi partnership was formed back in 2008 between different communities who are interested in researching and protecting Opihi, and we sort of our efforts grew out of being a part of this this partnership. We originally developed a monitoring method called chain transects, and we did that for a few years, but then we found that it was kind of cumbersome, and over time, as you work with a monitoring method, you learn and refine it. And so today, or for the last several years, we've developed what we call a rapid survey method. We're only surveying the Blackfoot Opihi, mainly because it's safer, because they're up higher on the shoreline, and they're just easier to be able to get a consistent count of, regardless of what the conditions are like. So we use that as kind of an indicator for the overall Opihi population. But what we do is we have teams of people that go out we have a transect is called a nana. The length of your arms basically spread out is about 2 meters is the width of one transect. And then we mark that with chalk, and then we have our clickers that represent the size classes. So you can see the centimeter markings there of the size classes A, B, C, D, E, F, and we just count all of the Opihi within that transect and use the clickers to just keep track of how many Opihi of the different size classes we're seeing. And then we kind of get an overall count, but we also get an idea of the ages and the size classes within that transect. We take a GPS point with each transect, and we go back to the same place year after year to be able to see changes over time and see the effect of our management actions. On the right there is Roxy Silva, who was with the Nature Conservancy Maui Marine Program and was really instrumental in helping us put together or support our monitoring programs. And that's a data sheet where the person who's You know, standing back with the GPS unit and the data sheet will record the information that's gathered by the surveyors. So this is just some photos of many different surveys that we've done in different locations, and it's really important to have community participation. This is an opportunity for, you know, students and community members and educational and community groups to get out on the shoreline and work together, protecting resources, learning about Opihi and just about the shoreline ecosystem in general. I mentioned Momona Again. We were fortunate to be part of a NOAA series of expeditions that went every year up to Momona Again to do research, including Opihi studies. And each year, one member from Kīpahulu and one member from our sister organization, Mālama I, that has also been part of the Opi Partnership and helped develop all of these protocols. One member from each organization went up to the islands and was able to see the Opihi in their, you know, sort of wild habitat and do this research. So that was a great opportunity, and we really appreciate being able to work with NOAA on that. So part of the working with scientists, it's really important that first off, that these initiatives are led by the community and driven by the community, and the scientists aren't just working on their own to, you know, do research that they come up with. They're really working with the community to identify what are the community goals, what are the information that we want to find out through our research, and then how can the science support that and provide expert consultation and help to us to develop research methods that'll answer the questions that we're looking to find. So we really appreciate our partnership with Dr. Bird and the other scientists who have been a part of this, and we appreciate how much he has always, you know, made sure that the community takes the lead on the project, and he's just supporting with the science to back up sort of Western science, backing up traditional indigenous science and Hawaiian knowledge. We've also partnered with the Nature Conservancy, and they've been really important in our Opi partnership. Helped us develop data sharing agreements. It's sensitive when you're collecting data about fisheries, about who has access to that and how it's shared. So we have data sharing agreements that define all that. We have a memorandum of understanding between the different organizations. We have, and they support us in our monitoring efforts with all the gear, and then sending that data off to Dr. Bird and his lab to be able to crunch the information for us. They also help us with our communications, outreach, educational programs, and documentation. So, you know, it's really great for communities to have the support of the scientists and the support of these NGOs that can help to make the programs really, really work. And so we after doing the surveys for a couple years, or maybe 3 years, I think, we had seen even within that time declining numbers within the Opihi, within the areas that we were surveying. And so in talking about some potential solutions, we came up with this idea of a Opihi rest area, or a voluntary no-take zone, a sanctuary. So we established one in Kīpahulu that is adjacent to the Haleakalā National Park campground. It runs from Ohio, the mouth of Ohio Stream in the north, to the edge of Kukui Bay in the south. And on the left there, you can kind of see what that shoreline looks like. This bit coming out all the way here is this one over here. So that's what the habitat looks like. It's good Opihi habitat. And because this area is where people come in and camp and have access to this shoreline, there was a concern that this area could be heavily impacted and over harvested. And so we wanted to provide some protection by establishing a voluntary Opihi rest area in this area. We worked with the national park to establish some signage that we put up at various entry points along the shoreline for the anybody who was coming to know that this was a no harvest Opihi area. And we developed this educational poster that is in the kiosk at the campground, just sharing about the Opihi rest area and the project. And also developed this kind of code of conduct or best practices. So even if you're picking, the whole point of this is not to stop people from picking Opihi. It's to make sure that there's plenty of Opihi for everybody. And, one of the strategies to do that is to set aside a certain area so that you don't harvest from that area. And part of the theory behind that, let me go back a little bit, back one here. Part of the, the theory behind that is that not only will that area be able to be abundant in Opihi, but because you'll have a good population and the Opihi are allowed to grow larger in that area, that it'll be a good spawning source that will spill over into surrounding areas. So it'll make sure that there's Opihi along the shoreline and all the other areas that are open for picking. And, essentially make more Opihi for everybody by resting one relatively small area. And then this is like the code of conduct or best practices for when you are picking outside of the rest area. And these are really based on, traditional practices. These came from, from the fishermen and Opihi pickers in Kīpahulu and in ʻOhana. Just saying, this is what we do, this is what we pass down to our families, but not everybody knows these things. And we want to just make sure that these kind of things are communicated and passed down. So, it's basically like communicating with other families so you don't pick at the same area at the same time. If you know that a family has just recently picked in an area, then you'll go someplace else, and give that area a chance to recover. Pick just a few for today. They say Opihi don't spawn in the freezer, so only take what you need for that. For what you can eat right then for your family, but and only take what the area can provide. There's kind of a saying, take only what you need, but you also have to think about take what the area can sustainably provide and regenerate. And then this is actually a state regulation, but it's, an 1.25 inches is the minimum size for Opihi. So the idea is, pick the medium sized ones. So the smaller ones have a chance to grow larger, but then also leave the really big ones because they are what are called prime spawners, or they have a higher reproductive capacity because a large Opihi will produce many times more eggs than a medium-sized Opihi, and the eggs are also richer and more likely to survive and pass on good quality genetic material. Heard something interesting recently from Palika Andrade, who's also done a lot of really interesting Opihi research about that the larger Opihi may not spawn as often. So they're not necessarily contributing more to the overall population, but there's still a value in that they're contributing good genetic material in the sense that they've survived, they've become big, and so they're good individuals, and that their offspring are healthy. And it's a good way to make sure that we're not selecting for, over time, having a selective pressure that's driving it to be a smaller population. Next item is hulihe'e, search everywhere. So just don't like completely wipe out one area. Pick a few from one area and then move a little bit, pick some more. And then finally, leave the koele alone. Don't pick the koele that live under the water line. Our efforts have focused on voluntary compliance. And I'll get to a little bit later about the CBSFA, how we're working to put some of these into actual regulations. But basically the idea is, really we want people to understand the reason why the rest area is important and the reason why these best practices are important, so that people will, through education, they'll be able to, voluntarily comply and not pick in the rest area, knowing the reason why. So a lot of our efforts are about just education and outreach. We also really try to work with local school groups and get young people involved. And, I know this is a NOAA sponsored program, and we're currently have a NOAA BWET watershed education and training grant that we have been working with science students in Hana High School to learn about, to sort of integrate conservation programs in our community with their science curriculum. So the things they're learning in this is a sophomore science class, that they're relevant to them in like a real life experience, and they know some of the things that their community are doing to put these, science into action. And so we've been working through this NOAA grant to, be able to bring the students out on field trips and things like that, and including getting involved with the Opihi monitoring. So this is one of our field trips from last year. One thing that's important is that while our focus is on Opihi, we look at these as charismatic creatures that help us to draw attention to the whole intertidal marine environment and a shoreline ecosystem. And while we're out, counting Opihi, we're also observing what else is happening in the habitat and what the relationships are. So the limu, the different varieties of limu, the other types of pupu, the ha'ue'ue or ha'uke'uke, depending on where you are, all the different creatures that share this habitat and interact with each other and sort of keep things in balance with each other. So it's an opportunity while you're out counting Opi to have conversations about these things and just observe and get to know what's happening, see changes over time or in different seasons, and also just get to know the community. So we build this community sense of responsibility of taking care of the shoreline, and that we really care about this place, and that we want to work together to come up with solutions to make sure that these resources are there for the future. One thing that we noticed that was, interesting is the National Park campground was closed for a period of about, almost 2 years, I think, due to the pandemic. And so, we know within this rest area, we try to do the education and outreach and everything, but we know that people still harvest within that rest area, either because they just don't see the education or, they might not care or whatever, but, people will still harvest. Even that voluntary compliance makes a difference. But what we noticed after having the campground closed for 2 years and really not having much outside pressure on the rest area is that we had some very large individuals that we hadn't seen in sort of this abundance before, of these giving the Opihi a chance to really grow up to this size. And again, this is important because of the reproductive capacity of these large Opihi, to seed not just the rest area, but the surrounding areas and potentially the entire island or Maui Nui. This is just a little graph showing a bit about one of the studies that we did. This is over a 3-year period, and won't go too much into the sciencey stuff here, but essentially this is just showing the left side is the up current side outside of the rest area, and the right side is the down current side outside of the rest area. And then these tall red bars are the down current area within the rest area. And it's basically just showing the change in Opihi population over a 3-year period. And you can see that generally the down current area of the rest area and outside of the rest area, the Opihi population increased once we put this voluntary rest area into place. So that told us that, you know, this method of trying to protect Opihi could be effective. And again, I won't get too much into the details here, but one thing that Dr. Bird found through some genetic studies, sorry, I'm getting some rain here, so hopefully the background isn't too noisy. The sites here in East Maui are actually serving as a source for the whole rest of Maui, even all the way up to the North Shore and the West Shores of Maui. We have genetic connections between these South and East Shores of Maui. Somehow the currents are carrying them up, and so the rest areas that are in this area, and this is Ahihiki now here, are actually serving to source the population of Opihi all around the islands. This is kind of just showing that same thing in a different way. And where are we now? Basically, Kīpahulu, we've been working for the past 10 years on developing a community-based subsistence fishing area for Kīpahulu, for the Kīpahulu Moku, or a CBSFA. So this is a proposal. The red line shows the sort of boundaries, which are the traditional boundaries of Kīpahulu Moku. We're proposing that Kīpahulu be designated as a community-based subsistence fishing area, which is a state designation of a marine managed area that allows us to make some rules and regulations that are specific to this area to try to protect the resources, and also to based on traditional practices, and to ensure that the Hawaiian lifestyle in relationship with these resources can continue. So this is also just showing a little bit about the rest area, the current flowing, and how the increase within the rest area showed. This is just kind of another version of the graph that I showed earlier, showing the area that we surveyed down current of the rest area showed an increase in Opihi as well. So these are the regulations that we're proposing within our community-based subsistence fishing area. So a bag limit of 40 Opihi, 40 Opihi, which is approximately a half-gallon shell on. No take Opihi while free diving, and this is mainly to protect the ko'ele under the water and make sure that they don't get harvested. No take within the rest area. And then also we're proposing a size, what's called a slot limit, which is right now there is already a state minimum of 1 1/4 inch, but we're proposing a 2-inch maximum limit to leave. Once they get up to that 2-inch size, then leave them alone, don't harvest them, and let them be the prime spawners, the reproducers to make the next generation. And we've also been working throughout East Maui with all the way from KNI to Kaupo with other communities who are interested in preserving their Opihi population. So we've been kind of teaching these monitoring methods and working through the Maui Nui Makai network to help other communities come up with plans for potentially putting rest areas in places in their areas, and just creating awareness around Opihi protection. And so just to kind of summarize, what we've learned through this process is that compliance can be achieved through guidelines and education and coconut wireless. Community-led action can have a real effect. Sometimes we kind of say, how can we make a difference, and we don't know where to start, but we found that by community taking action and just through education without having to like pass a law or anything like that, we have been able to make a difference, and we've seen that difference in our through our monitoring. Community involvement is the key to success of achieving sustainable fisheries. We can't rely on DAR and DOCARE and the state agencies to do this for us, and NOAA. Communities really have to be proactive in their own areas to take kuleana for taking care of their resources. Partnership and co-management models are essential. So even though the communities need to take the lead, it's by working with the state agencies and working with the nonprofit NGOs to support the communities that we can achieve success. It's also important for Opi to be managed cohesively across the state. So we're trying to set an example in Kīpahulu and come up with some rules that we think will work for our area, but it's our hope that this helps start a conversation statewide, and maybe some of these other communities can adopt some of these things, or even DAR and DOCARE can consider some putting some statewide rules in place that might help protect Opihi for everybody. The whole point of this is to keep eating and loving Opihi, and just need to manage them so that they don't get over harvested, and make sure that they are there for our future generations. And with that, mahalo for listening, giving me your attention and interest during this presentation. And for more information about our organization, you can visit Kīpahulu ʻOhana at our website at kīpahulu.org. And we're on Facebook and Instagram at Kīpahulu ʻOhana. And with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation and would be happy to have any answer any questions or anything that anybody might have.
Thank you, Scott. That was wonderful. I actually learned a whole bunch of stuff about Opihi that I didn't know before this presentation. I didn't understand that there's different types, and their life cycle is kind of amazing. But yeah, while we're waiting for people, I do have one question in the Q&A so far. If anyone else has any questions, please go over to that Q&A button on your screen. It's either on the bottom of your screen or on the top of your screen, and put those questions in. One question we did have, Scott, is can a person be fined or arrested for picking Opihi from the no-take zone?
So right now it's strictly voluntary. So no, there's no like punishment for picking within the Opi rest area. However, with the CBSFA, we are proposing that rest area be made into a regulation. So then it is potential that somebody could be fined for picking within the rest area. Now, our goal within the CBSFA is really to focus on education and outreach and getting people to comply with it because they understand the reasons behind it, not because they're afraid of enforcement. But if somebody was really, really abusing the ecosystem and just completely over harvesting, then there could be the potential that, that they could be fined for that. If, once the CBSFA is in place.
We do have a question in the chat. And this is a question that I actually had as well. What is the reason for not taking the Kuele Opihi in particular?
That's a good question. And I think that it's just kind of traditional. I'm not sure if maybe they just don't taste as good or I think people have a sense that they're the largest Opihi. I know that when you said like you didn't realize there was 3 different species, that's something that like this whole process has been obviously when we started this out, I didn't know anything about Opihi. It's been a complete learning process for me to discover these things over time as we've been working with the scientists and with the traditional, the traditional practitioners who have this knowledge. But what I found is even a lot of Hawaiians who like to pick Opihi don't really know about the different species. And they tend to think of koele as just being the largest Opihi, and the idea is to like leave the large ones there. So I think that sometimes people just leave them there because they're the largest ones and they don't want to pick them. But also I think it's just something about that the yellow foot in that intertidal zone with the limu are the best tasting ones. So they're the ones that tend to get harvested. They're the preferred. They're the delicacy.
That makes sense. We had someone asking for your guys' website, so I put it in the chat for those of you that missed it on the last slide. There should be a live link there for you guys now. Does anyone have any more questions?
Yeah, and for anybody who's interested in more information specifically about the Opi program or the CBSFA, we have a site there. If you go to kīpahulu.org/CBSFA, or if you just go up to the menu and say what we do, then Mālama I, then CBSFA, we have a lot of information there, including some fact sheets and the full management plan that you can read. And I should mention that we're in the process right now of finalizing the rules package to send to working with the Division of Aquatic Resources for them to send to the Board of Land and Natural Resources to go into the formal administrative rulemaking process, and that should be happening within the next few months. And we're still very open to receiving input. We've had many community meetings, and DAR just held a scoping meeting last month to gather input on this. And so anybody who has questions or suggestions about the CBSFA, feel free to email us, or we have a link on that website where there's a survey and people can make comments as well.
Perfect. We have a question about the koele. They're asking if they live part of their life in the upper two zones and then move.
No, I don't think so. They just tend to live down under the water. You'll tend to find them, they really like the boulder habitats, especially, and you'll find them down sort of underneath the boulders in in like a foot or two of water, depending on the tide. So a lot of times you won't even see them, but they're kind of down underneath the boulders in that area, a little bit further off, just slightly offshore from where the other ones are.
Okay, and then we have a question about in order to preserve Opihi in their natural state and to increase population numbers, can they be farm raised for consumption?
I am not sure about that. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of anybody who has tried to farm Opihi, so I don't know. It's a good question.
That is a super good question. I was also curious about that too. All righty. I'm just checking to see if anybody's typed anything since we've been talking. Scott, thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot of new things about Opihi. I'm super inspired that your particular organization has been really inspired by the community and by traditional knowledge, and then kind of backed up and supported by science. I think that's a wonderful way of merging both cultural practices and science. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are here today, just a reminder, don't forget to join our summer reading challenge. We have more virtual programs up and coming. So on the 13th, we have actually people from the DLNR talking about pono fishing practices, so sustainable fishing practices. And that's going to be a really great presentation. Our presentation today has been recorded. So for everyone that's attending, if you want to teach Someone else about Opihi, if you found this really interesting, you want to watch it again, you missed something, you logged in late, the recording should be available in about a week and a half. You'll get a reminder email in 7 days with the link to our YouTube page. But the video may not necessarily be live in 7 days, but you will have the link for where you can find it. And then Scott, again, this was really wonderful. Did you have any closing remarks before we log off?
Well, just thank you, Kylie, for the opportunity to share about our efforts, and thank you for everybody for tuning in, and love Opihi.
All righty, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you virtually again for our Pono fishing program coming up. Please don't forget to check out our website. I put it in the chat for our summer reading program. And everyone have a wonderful day. Aloha.
Okay, mahalo.